Alrighty. Hey everyone, welcome back to my stream. Today we'll be continuing with the Learning React series. Now, I'm not sure what exactly it is with the Learning React series, but more often than not, my streams have been interrupted with power cuts. So let's hope there wouldn't be any power failure this time. Yeah. Because of that, my last React stream was cut short. So here's what we're gonna do. It's been, I think, which stream number are we on? Oh, we're in stream 7 here. So I'm gonna begin it and let's do a quick recap first of where we are, what the current situation is, and then yeah, let's continue and move forwards with the course. So let's get started. Blog post data, set blog post data. Um were we in no, we didn't reach this, did we?
It is making two listeners from the doc.
I do remember we completed the use effect hook and we were at, let's see, yeah, we completed this. We checked out what the abort controller was used for, and um we placed some requests to this API over here to get users and whatnot. Was it here? Oh, okay, there we go. It's related to the API, I guess. Okay, let's begin. Let's just start from the beginning, in the sense from the beginning of this chapter. Post request example.
Made sense. Now, before we do move on from network requests, I do want to show you an example where we can make a post request to the server. So a post request, if you're not familiar with it, is the type of request that you would make whenever you want to create some kind of record or resource on the server side. A realistic example of this is, let's say, for example, you want to create a new user account on some platform. So what you would do is you would sign up, you would enter your display name, your username, email, password, all that kind of stuff. When you click on the register button, it's going to submit your data to a server via a post request. Okay, post basically is just a different request method. So when it comes to network requests via HTTP, you have GET requests, you have POST requests. You also have put and patch for updating a record on the server side. There are a bunch of different types of requests. Okay, so you basically make a post request, you send that data to the server side via the request body, and the server side will take care of saving the information on the database. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to set up a very simple post request where we are going to create a post, like a literal post, like a blog post. Okay, we're going to use the JSON placeholder server as well because they do have a post request endpoint that we can take advantage of. It doesn't actually add new posts on their endpoint. It probably uses some kind of mock service worker or something behind the scenes to make it simulate adding posts to the record, to the existing records. So we're going to do that. So what we're going to do is I'm going to set up two form fields because this endpoint is going to require, I'll show you. It's going to require a title and a body as well as a user ID. The user ID, we're just going to hard code that, but the title and body will have ourselves type information into
Oh, it's coming back to me now.
some text fields, and then we'll submit that to the server. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. First, let's define some state. I'll go ahead and call this post.
What do we
I'll call it
yeah.
blog post data. Set blog.
Oh yeah, we were creating a form to submit the data, right? So we had to submit the title and I believe, yeah, the body of the blog, and I think those two were the only things. Then of course there's the ID, but as he rightfully mentioned, we're just gonna hard code it for the time being. Enough talking, let's just see what we have with us right now. All right. Yeah, I remember that we did a bit of styling here. We added a bit of padding. Yeah. And we also added a break tag so that we have separation between all of the input. Then why do we have a, oh, this needs to be submit at S. And let's check. And then let's just add a break tag. But I don't think this was covered in my stream. I will, like, the previous stream was kind of like, at least it wasn't covered on YouTube since there was a power loss. I didn't I just streamed for like 10 more minutes more. It was just a power flicker, so it's not a power loss. But my Wi-Fi went down and streaming to YouTube stopped. I don't think this was covered, but yeah, this is basically what we're doing. I just created a form which accepts the title and body, and we're gonna emulate sending this to a mock server, mock API. Yeah, that looks way better.
And then this will basically be an object that is going to represent what we type into the form fields. We're just encapsulating everything in a single object instead of defining it.
Let's see. So I think what we can do is on, was it on submit? First of all, e dot target dot prevent. No, sorry, e dot prevent default. Was that it? Yeah. So prevent the default, which the default, by the way, is that it just reloads the page. We don't want that to happen. And what do we need to happen, right? We need to let's see. We wanna send in the post request. So let's just go up to that mock API. I think it was called JSON placeholder. And let's see. There was a post request. Or is this it? Yeah, this is it. Use your own data. Well, let's get the post first. Okay, so we are gonna send in a user ID, an ID, a title, and a body. Oh, I guess ID is for the post as such, and the user ID, if it were a real application, would relate to the user who posted the post. Now, that was a mouthful. But let's get started on that. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna use fetch, and let's just provide the URL here. We're gonna post send a post request to the post URL. So let this be an object, and I believe the thing was called method. Yep, it is. The method is gonna be post. It is, I believe it's get by default. um then we're gonna fill out the body, which is gonna be our, first and foremost, we need a user ID. Let's just make sure we got the casing right. So they followed, I believe it's called camel case, right? User ID, let's just hard code it to 1. And ID, now this would be a bit different, right? I guess for the timing, let's just hard code that too. ID can be 1. Then let's see here. We have title, and then we have body, which is gonna be what we collect from our form over here. We have title and we have body. You might be wondering, how do we get this? We use form data. I'm just gonna search up real quick using form data and React. Let's see how we're gonna do this. Not Axios. How do we? Oh, form data is this. Using form data and React with fetch. So let's see. Then okay, new some form element. I guess we're gonna pass an e here, and then body can just be form data. Cool. Guess what we'll have to do is we'll have to. I believe this is called the spread operator. We have to spread form data so that we create a new object here. Yeah, that should be it. We're gonna also go ahead and console.log form data. And Yeah, I believe that should work. So const response equals this. And I guess if this was submitted successfully, we can. Well, first let's just console.log response and see what we get. Then I guess we'll just follow ahead with the video. Let's. Oh, okay, that was weird. Was that caught on stream? Oh no, it wasn't. I guess what I'm seeing on my, yeah, this might be some obvious issue. I usually see some. I guess not usually, but often see some flickers here and there. So maybe some obvious issue. It's not caught on stream though. Anyhow, I'm just gonna go ahead and put title here. Test body. Call this test title. Hit submit, and we got some error. Some form element. Okay, this needs to be E. Yeah. Now if we hit submit, parameter one is not of type HTML form element. Believe it needs to be target then. Is that it? Okay, that's it. So let's see. So what do we have in form data? Okay, let's do one thing. Let's console.log this. We have some error. Okay. Um, we don't need a extra curly brace there. We have user ID. We don't. That didn't work. I guess. Maybe it's form data dot. We need to call in this. Mm, or maybe it's entries perhaps. Let's just do form data dot entries. See what that returns. Form data iterator. Let's just put this thing in here. Submit. Not exactly what I wanted. How do we use form data? Let's just go back and check. Here, what have they done here? Can we just do form data dot body? Form data dot string. There's an array of uh-huh. So what about form data dot values? Yeah, I need the dictionary. How do I do it? Hmm. Get all. Is this it? Perhaps is it? Yeah, let's just print this first. And let's just check and get fail to execute get all. Uh, one argument required, but only 0%.
As
Let's see. They're just passing in form data as it is, right? I wanna check what's inside form data. get values inside form data object. It looks like you get some data. And how do I to send using? Seems you can't get values of the form. Okay, it's primarily intended for use in sending form data, but can be used in the same format. Yeah. New form data. Just gonna do this, I guess, and submit. And let's remove get all. Just have this. Submit and um. I didn't log anything, did it? Console.log. All right. Well, our response worked. Return 201. Let's go back and see what
individual strings
is
or
being done in
statements
the
within strings.
course.
So we're going to need our title, which is going to be a default value of an empty string, and then our, I think it's the body. Let's double check. Body, yep, that's going to be an empty string as well. Okay. And then now let me go ahead and set up call value, all the callback, and
We can skip this. We already covered
I'm going to add a
this.
button. There's obviously one more field. Welcome user ID. We don't have an actual user, so we're just going to hard code this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a button that's just going to, we'll just add it. I click on this create, okay? And then what I'm going to do is fake a JSON server. So we're going to make a post request using self string. An empty string is a falsy value. So both of these strings need to be actual. It needs to be non-empty values for this condition to evaluate to true. Okay, so if at least one of these strings, if they evaluate to a falsy value, okay, so in other words, if one of them is an empty string, this whole condition will evaluate to false, which means that this whole block of code will not execute. And that's what we want. We want both the title and body to not be empty. Okay, so we're only going to make the API call if title and body are not empty. So if that's the case, I'm going to go ahead and use the fetch API. And what I'm going to do just to keep things simple, I'm going to actually just use the .then and .catch syntax to handle everything instead of just using async await. So I'm going to do fetch, and then we're going to need to specify the endpoint. So that's going to be this URL, and then slash posts, which is the endpoint right over here. So basically, this is the base URL, and then this is the endpoint that we are making the request to, slash posts. Okay. And then we need to make sure that we pass in the second argument, which is going to be our request options. So we want to make sure we explicitly set the method to post, because remember, by default, fetch is going to default to a get request, but since we're making a post request, we need to actually explicitly set that. And then we also need to make sure we pass in our request body. And remember that the request body is basically an object that you are going to be sending. Well, you're not actually sending an object. It may look like an object service level, but when it goes through the whole network, it's actually serialized. But in the end, it's actually going to result into an object. Okay, the way that the server parses it will end up being an object. So you want to always make sure that you have your request body right over here. And what we want to do is we just want to set the key value pairs that we want to send to the server. So the server is going to
I guess that answers that we can't convert it into an object directly. I mean, at least in a direct way.
expect three properties in our object. It's going to expect it'll be blog promise. Let's actually make sure that the network that
Blog post. Oh, okay. He's not using form data. Okay. All right.
that should be it. So before I do anything with handling the promise, let's actually make sure that the network request is succeeding. We can verify that in the network tab. So I'm going to refresh the page and watch what happens when I type hello world and then hey. Let's click on create post. Okay, so when you look at the network tab, you can see that a request was made to the server. And I know that this request succeeded because the status code is green. Well, it's a 201 status code, which is a successful status code, and it's green. And 201 basically means that you created the record successfully, okay, which is good. If you look at the payload, you can see an object was sent. If you look at preview, so right now, actually, we have a problem because if you actually look at the payload, this is not what it should look like. And the preview of the data, it should actually return the actual entire object with the title and the body that we sent. But right now, it's not actually returning that. And you can also confirm this if you look at the documentation of this mock server, that this is actually what it's supposed to return. Now, the reason why this is happening is because right over here, for our body property, it's not actually supposed to be an object. It's supposed to actually be a stringified object itself. So the easiest thing that we can do is we can actually use this JSON.stringify method and then just pass in the object itself. So what this will do is this will literally just convert the JSON object from an object to an actual string, and that is what we need to do in order for this API.
Basically, JSON.dump equivalent. I that's weird to say because JSON literally means JavaScript object notation. If anything, JSON.load should be the JSON dot sorry JSON dot dumps should be the JSON dot stringify equivalent.
Request to properly create the data. Okay, even though the request succeeded, the content that we send was not correct. Now I'm going to go ahead and refresh the page, and I'm going to show you what happens now. So let's do hello world create post. So the request succeeded. Now notice how this time, if I look at the payload, you'll see that it says body, title, and user ID. If I look at preview, we have 101. Not really sure why it is still. Maybe let's see. Oh, you know what? I forgot to add one more thing. Perhaps I need to
Headers.
set the content type to application/JSON. Maybe that's what it is. So that's good that we caught that. So oftentimes when you are making network requests,
Let's have this if statement and just change our part of the thing a bit. All right, so and let's call in prettier. Okay, and instead of calling this, let's just set the title to be blog post data dot title, and what else? The body. It's called the body. To be blog post data dot body, and yeah, that should be it. Let's see what we have on our request panel over here. Let's actually reload. Test title, test body, hit submit, and we got a 201. Doesn't work as expected. So if you look at the docs, where is the docs here? Okay, I guess I wonder where the docs are. Guide maybe? Okay, there we go. So let's see here. Body. Is it this one? Yeah, I think this one. Okay. So we need to stringify this and we need to add these headers here. And let's go ahead and do that real quick. Add the headers and then let's call JSON.stringify on this. That should do the trick. We go back and hit submit. Oh, all right. Okay, there we go. We got the correct preview. It's all right. Looks all right to me. Response is this. It says ID 101. Test title, test body. Alrighty.
the server needs to know how to interpret data and how to parse the data as well. So when you set these headers such as content type, that allows you to specify, okay, this is supposed to be JSON. Okay, so let's go ahead and just add this part real quick. And let's paste that over here, just like this. And now we should not have any issues. We still do need to stringify though. So if I go ahead and refresh, just type some random stuff. So now, yep, there we go. We have the correct response sent back from the server. We have the correct preview, and the payload is perfectly fine. And if I were to remove the stringify part and just return, or just send this itself, okay, you can see we get a 500 error code. And this time I can actually handle that correctly in the catch block. Okay, so let's go ahead and just handle our success and errors. So when the response is successful, we're going to get a response back. And all I'm going to do is call response.json because I want the actual JSON object that was sent back from the server. And I'll just go ahead and say success, and then I'll log the data. If there is an error, we'll just go ahead and catch that. And then I'll just console log the error like this. Okay.
Okay, so basically we're saying if this is successful, let's get the response, and then we'll just console.log response.json. Wait, this returns a promise, isn't it? Dot. Can we use dot then here? Yeah, we can. Now once we, okay, I see what's happening. It's coming back to memory now. Right now we return this, and when this promise evaluates to true, right, which is essentially the data, we're gonna console.log that. We're gonna say success, then we're gonna print log the data there. But in the event of error anywhere, we're gonna console.log error, and we're just gonna log that instead.
Again, a very basic service level example of how to make a post request. Now, if I go ahead and refresh the page, and if I try to do this, you'll see now we actually are able to properly handle our errors. On line 33, it is logging syntax error unexpected token S. So yeah, you can see that it is erroring out because of this object over here. Okay, now let's go ahead and just add that JSON.stringify call again to this object, and we should no longer get the error.
Ooh, okay, let's just see what that error is. Okay, as expected, fail. What does it say on my console though? Syntax error, unexpected token S. Syntax error is not valid JSON. All right, let's bring back that formatted, and then hit submit again. This time we got success, which means it worked.
You can see now it logs success and then the actual response from the server when we successfully created the record. So yeah, hopefully this makes sense. I don't think if you actually were to call the post endpoint, it would actually show you the actual added post. So don't worry about that though, it's okay, because like I said, the whole purpose of this example is to show you how to actually make a post request. So now that you know how to do this, when you actually have a real API that you're going to make post requests to, you know how to do that. You know how to paste the URL, you know how to specify the method request type, you know how to parse the JSON object that you want to send into a string by using JSON.stringify, and then you know about the headers as well. So hopefully this part made sense. Now, before I move on entirely from the useEffect hook, I did also want to show you.
Okay, let's just do a commit here real quick before we move ahead. So let's just call this submit form created post functionality for blocks. Let's commit that.
You a couple of other examples and some other patterns that you can use the useEffect hook for. So as I mentioned earlier, whenever you register event handlers directly on the document itself, that is also another known example of performing a side effect. And it's not that it's a bad thing, because oftentimes you will need to do that. So an example would be if you need to detect when the user is resizing their viewport, their browser, then you may want to perform some kind of action. I'll show you how to do that using a useEffect hook. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and call useEffect and then pass my callback function. And I only want to have this callback function executed one time, and it would make sense because we only want to register the event listener once on the document. It wouldn't make sense for us to register multiple times because there's just no need to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an empty dependency array. This will ensure that my callback executes one time only, no matter how many times we update our state. If there is any state, if we update it, this will make sense. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead. Then you may want to perform. We'll need to do that. So an example would be if you need to detect when the user is resizing their viewport, their browser, then you may want to perform some kind of action. I'll show you how to do that using a useEffect hook. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and call useEffect and then pass my callback function. And I only want to have this callback function executed one time, and it would make sense because we only want to register the event listener once on the document. It wouldn't make sense for us to register it multiple times because there's no need to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an empty dependency array. This will ensure that my callback executes one time only, no matter how many times we update our state. If there is a state, if we update it, it's not going to cause this callback to execute again. And I showed you that in earlier examples of the useEffect hook. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an event listener on the window object. So I'm going to do window.add event listener. And there are a bunch of events that you can register directly onto the window itself. The one I'm going to do is let's do resize. So this will, of course, occur whenever you resize the browser window. And what I want to do is I could pass in the callback function. This is known as a listener function because it literally listens to the event, and it's going to be what is used to handle the events whenever it happens. Okay. So instead of actually just passing the callback function like this, I'm actually going to go ahead and create a function, a named function specifically. So I'm going to go ahead and call this resize event handler just to be more verbose with my variable names. And then I'm going to go ahead and pass it like this. Now, the resize event handler does take in an argument. You can even see that in IntelliSense right here. If I were to do this, you can see that the event itself is a UI event. So we're going to go ahead and do E. And I'll just go ahead and console log window viewport resized. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and go into my browser now, and I'm going to show you what this looks like. So let's refresh the page. Notice how if I change the size of my viewport, you can see that it says window/viewport resize, which implies that this resize event handler function is in fact being called every single time it detects a resize of the viewport. Of course, if I were to, let me do this. Let me kind of resize the browser itself. I mean, resizing the browser is going to cause the viewport to resize, so it's going to trigger the event regardless. You can see that the view is changing, and then that event is being triggered. Okay. Now, what we want to do is
Wait a second.
see that it says window resize of the viewport.
Oh, okay. I see what happened there. We basically added that event listener once the page was loaded, and then that just takes effect.
So we're going to go ahead and do E, and I'll just go ahead and console log window viewport resized. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and go into my browser now, and I'm going to show you what this looks like. So let's refresh the page. Notice how if I change the size of my viewport, you can see that it says window/viewport resize, which implies that this resize event handler function is in fact being called every single time it detects a resize of the viewport. Of course, if I were to, let me do this. Let me kind of resize the browser itself. I mean, resizing the browser is going to cause the viewport to resize, so it's going to trigger the event regardless. You can see that the view is changing, and then that event is being triggered. Okay. Now, what we want to do is whenever the component unmounts, because it could possibly unmount, we want to make sure that we are unregistering this event from the window itself. Because if we don't do that, and the component unmounts, what's going to happen is that if the component mounts again, which could possibly happen, especially if you're performing something like a conditional render, it's going to cause another event of the same instance to be registered again. So in other words, when the app component remounts, your resize event is going to be registered again and again and again. Okay. So to avoid registering the same event multiple times, what we want to do is we want to use the cleanup function inside our useEffect callback. Now, this is something that I did show you earlier when we first talked about useEffect hooks, but in case you missed that, the cleanup function is basically this function that you can return inside the callback itself. So it looks like this.
Yeah.
Return, and then this function right over here, and this is your cleanup function. This function is called whenever your component unmounts, okay? Which happens whenever the component no longer needs to be rendered anymore, no longer needs to be in the document anymore. So it will just unmount from the document, and then if you need to render the component again based on some kind of condition or for whatever reason, then it will basically mount itself and then call the useEffect hook at least once, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and call window.remove event listener, and I want to specify the event that I want to remove that I no longer want to listen to, and that's going to be the same event, resize, whoops, right over here. And here's the thing though, as a second argument, we need to pass in the listener function, which is resize event handler right over here. This is very important because if you don't pass in this callback, you're not going to actually remove this event from being listened to in the documents. Okay, so it's very important. And the other reason why I did not use an anonymous function, like the other reason why I didn't do this, is because you actually need a reference to the function itself. So that way we know which specific event and which function that handles that event to actually entirely remove it from. If you use an anonymous function, there's no way that you can actually know which function is handling that event. And also it's not going to actually remove the event listener from the document itself, or from the window in this case. So that's why we need a named function, so we have reference to it. Okay, so now what's going to happen is it's going to remove this event listener. So let's do this. Let me go ahead and refresh the page. So obviously right now it's still going to work. Well, let's see what I can do. You know what? Maybe what I can do is I can actually move this into a different component. So let me do this just to show you an example. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this whole thing, I'm going to cut it. I'm going to paste this inside just any component. I'll use the login form as an example. Okay, any component will work fine. You don't have to use the login form component. You can use any component. I'm going to conditionally render the login form component based on a state variable. So I'll do a toggle variable. So it's going to be toggle between true and false. And then I'll have a button that will allow me to update the state of toggle each time. So whenever I click on the button, it's going to toggle between false to true, true to false. So basically, I'm going to call set toggle, and then I'm basically just going to update the state to the opposite value because there's only two possible values, true or false. And then what I'm going to do is this: whenever the button is true, whenever the toggle variable, whenever the value is true, we're going to render login form just like this. Okay, and the whole purpose of this is I want to show you the login form component unmounting, and I will add a console log inside this cleanup function, unmounting login.
I like how React on its own is like, you can't say it's exactly like Node. I mean, so yeah, it is using Node, yes, but in a way it's different, right? Like the concepts and stuff that you have to learn.
Form, and then I'll also add another log removing resize events listener. Okay, so whenever toggle is true, we're going to render login form. Login form will render, and it's going to go ahead and call this useEffects callback one time and one time only, because we have our dependency array set to empty. So even if state changes inside login form, this will not call the callback again, unless if we added that state variable to this dependency array. That's how it works. So now let's go ahead and test this whole thing out. I'm going to go into my browser, and in my dev tools, I'm going to go to elements and then event listeners right over here. And I'm going to show you to verify the event being registered and unregistered. So I'm going to refresh the page. By default, right now, the resize event listener is not being listened to, because remember that we are only registering it when the login form is rendered to the document, and currently we're not rendering it because toggle is set to false because we're doing a conditional render. Now I'm going to go ahead and click this toggle button, which will update the state of toggle to true, and that will cause the login form to render, which will then cause this useEffects callback to be invoked. So let's go ahead, click toggle. Now you can see right now, if you look at the logs, it does say unmounting login form and then removing resize event listener. Remember that we're in strict mode, so your component, your useEffect hook, is going to be invoked twice. Okay, so it renders the component, unmounts it, and then it renders it again. Okay, so that's the reason why you only see this cleanup function being invoked one time.
Okay, so let's remove strict mode.
That's why it logs these two messages one time only. Okay, the second time it renders the component, but it does not unmount, so the cleanup function is not called. Remember, the cleanup function is only called when the component unmounts from the document. Okay, so I clicked on the toggle button and I can see the login form. Now I'm going to go over here to event listeners, and I'm going to click this reload button or refresh event listeners, because we did in fact add an event listener, but it's just that this thing needs to be refreshed to see it. So you can see now, right over here, I can clearly see that this resize event appears, and it's on the window, and you can see the handler, and I'm not sure if you can probably see the implementation, probably not, but it does tell you that this event is in fact being registered. You can see resize is right over here, and it's on the window itself. Okay, that's awesome. Now, of course, to verify even more, I can resize the window, and you can see window/viewport resize is being logged, which is what we have being called whenever we resize the window itself. Okay, now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click toggle again. That will update the state of toggle to false, which will then remove the login form from the document, because remember, we are conditionally rendering this component, and since toggle is false, login form will not be rendered, so the component will be unmounted. So watch what happens. I'm going to click toggle. Now you can see that unmounting login form and removing resize event listener was logged to the console, which implies that our cleanup function inside this useEffect in our login form component is being called. So window.remove event listener is being called as well. Okay, and to verify, if I refresh this event listener section, you'll see that we no longer see the resize event appearing over here. And I can further verify, if I resize the browser, the window, you can see that the window/viewport resize is not being logged. This was from previous, but I'm going to go and clear the console, and I'm going to resize. And you can see it's not being logged at all. If I click toggle again, refresh this, I can verify the resize event was in fact registered, and I can resize the viewport, and I can see that that callback function is being invoked, and it's calling the console log, and it's logging this message to the console. So I hope this makes sense, because it's important to understand invoke. I can verify the console, and I'm going to resize, and you can see it's not being logged at all. If I click toggle again, refresh this, I can verify the resize event was in fact registered, and I can resize the viewport, and I can see that that callback function is being invoked, and it's calling the console log, and it's logging this message to the console. So I hope this makes sense, because it's important to understand that whenever you register an event listener, you need to know when exactly you want to unregister it, and a good time to unregister it is when it's no longer needed, and that really just depends on your application needs. In my situation, I don't need it if the login form is not rendered to the document, so I'm going to unregister it by calling window.remove event listener inside the cleanup function. Okay, now obviously you can register whatever events you want, so if you want to register an event on the document, you can. So document.add event listener. There are a bunch of other events. Let's do a click event, right? And let's go ahead and add a callback function. Let's call this handle document click. So this will basically be triggered whenever we click anywhere in the document. Let's do click documents. Okay, and then now I'm going to just duplicate this part, but instead it's just going to be document.remove event listener, and it's just going to be click, and then we're going to go and pass the same handler that we used to register the click event on the document, so handle document click. And now I'm going to go ahead and refresh. If I click toggle and I refresh, you'll see now we have resize, and we also have click, which is on the document itself. Now I can click anywhere, and you can see whenever I click on anywhere in the document, it's going to go ahead and log click document. Okay, if I click toggle, you're going to go ahead and see that when I click again,
it doesn't.
The logs do not log click document because
that callback function ran and it deregistered. Remove the event listener.
Event was unregistered. If I refresh, you can see that click is no longer there. Same thing with resize. So I hope that this makes sense, because it's very important to understand how to properly register and unregister events from your document or really anything. Okay, any HTML elements. Now, there's one more thing that I do want to show you, and that's how to write custom hooks in React. So far, we've used two hooks. We've used the useState hook, and we've also used the useEffect hook. There are often times where you want to create your own custom hooks, because you might have, let's say, for example, a useEffect hook that has a bunch of reusable logic that you may want to reuse in other components as well. I'm going to show you how to do that right now. It's actually very simple. So what I like to do is I like to create a new folder And typically I call these utils, and inside the utils folder, I create a folder called hooks, and this is where all of my custom hooks will go. So hooks have a convention. Whatever the name of your hook is, you want to always prefix it with the use prefix. So for example, let's say my hook, the responsibility
Oh,
of
that's why use state, use effect.
the hook is supposed to register an event listener on the document whenever I click on anywhere in the document, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and name my hook use document click, or you can call it use click documents. Okay, and we're gonna do .jsx. Or actually, we can actually just do .js because inside this use effect, we're not actually returning any JSX at all. It's just all going to be just plain JavaScript. So now this function is going to look like this: function use document click. We also want to make sure we are exporting it. So I'll do that. Export function use document click. And then what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to go ahead and inside this function, I'm going to go ahead and call the use effect hook. And I'm going to go ahead and register the click events inside this use effect hook. Okay. So we're going to do document.add event listener click. And it's basically going to look exactly like what we did inside this use effect. Okay. So I'm going to copy this handle document click all back, and I can actually just put it up top over here. And then what I'll do is actually, you know what, I'm going to put it inside the use effect. And what I'll do is I'll just pass it over here. And then we also want to make sure we have our cleanup function to take care of unregistering the events. So return. And I'm going to go ahead and do documents.remove event listener click, and then handle document click. Okay. And so now what I can do is anywhere in my application, I can use this custom use document click hook. Okay. So the way it's going to look like is this. First, let me remove all of this stuff over here. And let me remove this. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead inside my login form. So right underneath this use effect hook, I'm going to go ahead and call use document click. Just like this. Okay.
All right, basically we're just creating a function as such and just invoking it. We can use it in different JSX files. We can use it in login form. We can use it in app. We can use it in user details. Up to us.
And now if I go to the browser,
In different components, I should use more and more React terms from now on.
well, actually, you know what? Let me do this. I'm going to write a console log, use document click. So let me go ahead and refresh the page. So remember that our login form is being conditionally rendered. So by default, it's not going to go ahead and execute any of these hooks or any of the logic here. So let's click toggle. So that will cause our login form to be rendered. And now you can see that use document click is being logged to the console, which implies that our hook is properly being invoked. Okay. And also one more thing, let me add an empty array over here because I only want this hook to register one time, or I only want this hook to be called one time, the callback function. And then I only want the event to be registered once. Okay, so let's refresh, click toggle. Now you can see that again, because we're in strict mode, it's going to go ahead and invoke that callback function twice because the component renders 2 times. That's okay because we are also unmounting the component after the first render, and we are properly handling the removal of the event listener. Okay, so in the end, our event is only registered once. So you can see over here that we have use document click log twice. After the first time, it's unmounted, so it calls this callback again, and then you can see use.
Yes, is this strict mode made available so that everyone, make sure to properly unmount the hooks? I mean, effects, I guess, even listeners, right?
Clicks log. So anywhere I click, it's going to go ahead and just trigger this event. Okay, so this is an example of how you can create custom hooks. You can do the same thing with literally any use effect hook, or even if you're creating a custom hook that defines some state and have it returning those state, you can also do it as well. Okay, so this is just a very simple example of how to create a custom hook. Okay, so I hope this part makes sense.
All right, we covered a lot in this segment here. So I have to go back and code it out, of course, otherwise it won't stay in my head. So we'll go ahead and do that. And yeah, I didn't realize it, but we're happy. I think we have passed the halfway mark already. So yeah, there we go. Still a lot to cover, and yeah. And then I'm gonna take a quick break here. I'll come back and let's just code this part out and then move ahead. Right, see you in a few. Alrighty, I'm back. So let's continue. As discussed, we're gonna first of all go ahead and just point out what was covered in this segment. It's a pretty big segment, so bear with me. So basically, it's just teaching about adding event listener and how to properly exit a use effect hook, right? Well, properly in the sense it depends on your application's usage, but most of the time you want when you unmount, right? You want to ensure that you provide a callback function, right, to the use effect hook. So I'm just gonna test that out real quick. Let's see here. Use effect. Let's see. Dependencies will be an empty array. This ensures that this is only run once, and within this I'm gonna call the window object. I'm gonna do add event listener, right? Type would be, how do I get this? Window dot view. Window dot click. I Okay. Let's just check how the add event listener works. So let's see here. Type and listener. Okay. To add event listener. First, we need to provide a string, I guess, of what the listener is for our reference. And then what's this? Wheel handler. That's another function. Um, I want to listen to the viewport.
To
Yeah.
know how. So don't worry about that though. It's okay because, like I said, the whole purpose of this example is to show too. To add an event onto the event and passing the call this resize event handler just to be more verbose with my variable names.
Mhm.
Sensor. Go ahead and console and go into my browser now. And I'm going to show you or resized. Okay.
Oh, okay. I see how this works now. So the first thing that you give it resize click, that's the actual event which happens. So here we'll be passing in resize. Now the second uh thing that I give this is going to be the actual function or event that should happen. So I'm gonna define const handler, actually resize handler. This can be an arrow function which just console.log window has been resized. You can just do window dot, is it with, or what did he print?
And I'm gonna go ahead and go into my
Oh,
browser now. And I'm
I
gonna
guess he just print that. Okay, let's just print it in that case. What happened here? Comma expected. This needs to be an arrow function. Something else. Hmm. Oh, okay. This needs to return. Is that right? Nope. Oh, wait. You don't return this, do you? There's something's happening with this comma expected.
show you resized.
Fonts resize event handler. Oh, okay. I see. This logic needs to be inside this. Is that what it's supposed to be about? Yeah, I think that's it. Now what? When listener. This needs to be a function of its own. All right. Da, 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 da. What's this expression expected? I mean by expression expected. Yeah, let's just remove that. Put this in here. Let's just call prettier. Do your magic, and yeah, we're gonna pass in the resize handler here. So okay, let's see if this worked. Okay, I'm missing a bracket here. Curly brace that. Let's go ahead and see for ourselves. Okay, it's sensing that, all right. Now we have, so when this thing unmounts, right, we need to make sure that the use effect thing is also like disregarded properly. So for that, we're gonna return an arrow function, which will basically window dot remove event listener, resize, and it can be resize handler. And let's console.log remove listener, resize listener, and let's just save this here, see what happens. So when I reload, we can see that it says removed resize listener, but you might be asking if the thing just loaded, right? But first and foremost, it did remount itself, right? Because we're in strict mode, so the resize thing has mounted again. Because when you're in strict mode, it remounts twice apparently. So if I were to come in here and remove strict mode, so just to do this, You can see it's not, you know, remounted. I mean, removed and then mounted again, which I guess translates to remounting. But yeah, okay. Makes sense so far. Now let's see if this actually works by doing conditional rendering, because that's when we can kind of trigger this thing mounting and remounting, right? And also on that, not create our own hook, or our own custom hook. So for that, what we're gonna do is we're gonna, was it the login form? Yeah, I believe it was the login form that we are gonna rent. I'll try to render again. I'll just put this in here and let's what's this app, right? To import login form. Yep. And then just let's just call login form. I don't, does it take in anything? Yeah, it doesn't take any. I believe that term is props. Just reload. Okay. Use effect is not defined. Okay, I need to go ahead and import use effect from React. Is that, yeah, there we go. Let's just reload. Remove because again, remember we're in strict mode and it does this thing where it loads and then remounts it again. But if I resize it, you can see that this thing is being triggered. So I'm gonna have a button now, which, okay, let's just have this in place. So const, um, let's just go to use editing set edit state. Toggle and set toggle state. Oops, this, for that case really wrong there. Set toggle state can be set to use state false by default. Return, either you can return oh actually, um let's think here first and foremost. Let's have this on a new line, and we can go ahead and have a toggle button, which on click, just take the event document and then I just call set toggle state. I take current toggle state and change that to be the opposite. And yeah, that should work, I believe. And I'm also gonna just console dot log. Well, not while clicking. I'm just gonna. Oh, you know what? Let's just do that while clicking. So console dot log toggle. Yeah, let's just console dot log that. Save. All right. And now we're gonna have a condition here. If this is false, this will short circuit itself. So toggle and login form. Is this it? Let's check. Okay, there we go. So if I reload initially, um, even though we're on strict mode, it doesn't render because we're not in strict mode. If I toggle, you okay? This because it's in strict mode, it kind of remounted itself, and we can say it's being removed resize listener. Okay. But if I but the resize listener is still here. In fact, how do I check it in? Yeah, okay, we'll check that out. But if the listener is here, as you can see, it's sensing this. If I click toggle again, that callback function we gave kicks in, right? Because we're unmounting this, right? This thing short circuits, and we're unmounting the login form component, and hence this callback function kicks in, which removes the resize even listener. And yeah, now if I do this, it simply doesn't work. There we go. We've been able to emulate this. One more thing left to do is to create our own custom hook right now. So I believe the convention for this is you create a folder here, call it utils, and then you have hooks. Is that how it is? I think that's how it works. Then there's a convention. I'm gonna call this use document click.js. Before I use it that way, I'm gonna first of all, let's create it. So similar to this, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna have another use effect. Let's call this, register this one after resize handler. This one is gonna be called as the click handler. I am streaming to, yeah. I just get a bit scared sometimes because there has been an instance where I did an entire stream on Twitch, but then I forgot to put it on YouTube and I had to do a summary instead. And the worst thing about it was the ending stream of a series. So yeah, always good to check. Let's just remove click listener. Click has been registered on window. Click has been registered. Sensed. Let's just do click has been sensed. Um, yeah, this should do. So let's go back, see if this works. First, we need to invoke this. All right, that works. And now I'm gonna go ahead, first of all, let's see if when I click this, it should say, yep, remove click listener. And this should, yep. Let's turn this off. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna take in the click listener use effect thing and use effect hook for click, and we're gonna create our own hook. So we're gonna place it in the previously created use document click file, and we're gonna call this uh, first export default function. Yeah, and we're gonna call it well, let's just call it document click. But I guess we need to call it use document click, right? Because that's what we would be importing at the end. Then yeah, I guess this can just return this. And should work. If I go back here and import use document click from let's see here, utils slash book slash use document click. Is that how? Okay, that's some error. I'm probably importing it the wrong way. If I can grab import statement from somewhere. I just I need to do dot slash. Is that it? What happened here? Oh, okay. What am I doing wrong here? Okay, that it doesn't. Oh, because I'm importing it from here, I guess I can't use dot slash. Is that it? Needs to be SRC perhaps. I need to get these import statements right. Let's see. So this is the parent folder. From here, go into components and go into login form. That's what this says. So I'm calling it from here. Um, hmm, from dot slash. I need to go out of this, right? That's what the two, I believe the two dots indicate, and then go into utils slash. Yeah, it auto directed it. Great. This should work now. I mean, it shouldn't give me an error. Okay. Does not provide an export name use document click. Okay, let's check whether it does not. Export default function. Oh no, I edited the wrong form. Export default function. Use document click. Use document click. Are you sure about it? I'm pretty sure it does. Export default function. Does this work? Oh, it does. We have to just go back and check what the default thing was again. I feel it's related to that. I guess when I say export default, I don't need to specify what to import. Is that it? I think so. Maybe. Well, we'll check. Right now, let's just check if our custom hook works. So what we're gonna do is after we call the resize handler, we're gonna call use document click. I think that's it really. If I'm using default, I can't. Oh, never mind. I have to. Oh, I don't have to use the curly braces. Maybe with that. That's it. Um. Yeah. Let's see if this hook works. Fail to. Okay. Let's just reload this. Requested module does not provide an export name. Okay. Export. Okay, I'm gonna just revert back to what it was before. Let's check if it works, and then we go into what export default versus export means. Now what? Now it should work, right? Use effect is not defined. Okay. See, I need to import use effect from here. Okay, let's reload, and there we go. It's working. And the best thing about custom hooks is that now if I want to use document click, say in my user details, sorry, not in the user. Yeah, we can use it in user details, but let's say I want to use it in the app. As such, I can just import import use document click from there, and I can just I believe I just need to call this here, right? And guess what? That should work as expected. If I reload, the click listener is already there. If I toggle, another click listener has been added, and oh, you can see that the console is detecting it 2 times now. If I toggle this off, it'll just detect it 1 time. Perfect. So yes, that's how you can create custom hooks. Let me just remove this. Oh, actually, you know what? Yeah, let's just remove this. And let's commit this first and foremost. Oh, actually, let's look at what the next topic is, and then we can decide. Speaking of topics, we're reaching the 1.5 hour mark, so I guess we'll just look at what the next topic is, and then probably be ending the stream there. But yeah, let's just look at what the next topic is.
Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and go into my browser now, and I'm going to show you what this looks like. In this section of our React tutorial, I want to teach you about the React Context API. The best way to understand the Context API.
Okay, so we are going to go ahead and commit this. So, what did we learn through this? We learned. Wait, first and foremost is the way that I created utils and hooks correct? Yeah, it is. You need to call it utils and hooks, right? In the, I mean, this might be a convention that and the one who's Anson follows, right? But I think it's a common convention as such. So maybe I'm not sure. Right. So utils and hooks. I also like. I mean, I also like how VS Code icons has a separate icon for this, so it probably must be popular. Let's just call this custom hooks. Custom hooks, comma, proper unmounting. Let's just ensure. Yeah, there we go.
Of our React tutorial, I want to teach you about the React Context API. The best way to understand the Context API and the purpose of it is to understand a problem that you'll run into. So let's say, for example, I have these 3 components that I just created from scratch, very simple components. Okay, I have a post container component, and this is typically a wrapper component that contains all of the posts that you would want to display to the user to see, such as social media posts as an example, right? It's supposed to display a list of posts, but just for simplicity, I'm only rendering one instance of the post content component. Now, post content is a child component of post container, and post content has its own child components as well, such as this post content buttons component. In this case, it only has one, but it could have more than one. And then the post content buttons component currently has nothing, but down the road, as your application grows, you may render other elements or components in this component as well. So if you think of it like this, if you think of it in a tree hierarchy, you have post container, post content, and then post content button. And then, of course, we may render post container in a root component such as the app component itself. So that would create a hierarchy of 4 layers. Now, that's not a problem, but think of it like this. Let's say, for example, down the road, we may have to pass some props from post container down to post content, and then allow post content.
We'll have to go ahead and just it will become quite a lot of work.
Use those props.
That's why you follow dry. Do not repeat yourself.
To serve data to the user, render it to the document, whatever. And then maybe those props will also need to be passed down to post content buttons as well. And then maybe if post content buttons have its own child components, it needs to pass those props as well. So I'll show you an example where I have some props. So I'll define some state right now. I'll just call this data, just a simple example. Hello world, just simple string. And then I need to pass data down to post content. So I'll just call the prop data. And then post content needs this prop. And then we need to pass data down to post content buttons. Okay, and then let me go ahead and take that data in. And I'll finally render it inside this component. Okay, we're not going to do the prop validation. I'm just going to show you a simple example. I'm going to go ahead and render post container in my app component so we can actually see it in the document in our website. And there you go. You can see that this hello world text is being rendered from this post content buttons component. Okay, and of course, if I remove this, it disappears. So if you notice right now, I have to pass this state variable as a prop down to post content, and then I have to pass from post content down to post content buttons. Okay, so I have to pass the prop 2 times. Now, it could be more complicated. I may have, let's say, 10 other child components that are in its own layer in the hierarchy. So, for example, post content buttons may have other child components it needs to render, and then we need to pass data down to those child components. Okay? And we don't know how many times we have to pass that prop down until we can finally actually display it to the document or do something with it. And this becomes a problem when you have a very large code base, when you have a bunch of different components, because it becomes very unproductive having to go through a bunch of different files and just drilling the prop down each layer over and over again. This is known as prop drilling. And then if something changes in your application, down because it becomes very unproductive having to go through a bunch of different files and just drilling the prop down each layer over and over again. This is known as prop drilling. And then if something changes in your application, let's say you no longer need the prop anymore, well, you're going to have to go through each component and remove that prop from the function signature over here, from the arguments section, right? And you're going to have to remove it right over here. And then it's just a bunch of unnecessary work that you have to worry about, especially if you have a very large code. So imagine you have to pass your prop 10 times, and then if you no longer need that prop down the road, you're going to have to go through 10 different files just to remove that prop and then make a pull request and then deploy that change to production. It becomes a headache. So this is where the React Context API allows you to avoid this problem. So think of the React context like this. Instead of having my data right over here inside post container, and then having it passed down to post content and then pass from post content to its child components, what I can do is I can actually have my data, my state, set inside the context itself. And I want you to think of it like this. The context itself is literally just an object, okay? And it's separate from the component level itself. The context can hold information that can be accessible from any component that is within the context. Okay, and again, it's hard to kind of like understand how that works just from a verbal example, and that's why I'm going to show you in code how this is structured. Okay, but basically the context itself allows you to store information, and then as long as
I think it's, judging from what he's saying verbally, it's something like a global dictionary which is accessible at all the components which we choose to make it accessible to.
as your components are within the context, if they're wrapped inside the context, known as a context provider, those components can access that data anywhere they want without needing to have it passed as a prop. Okay, so for example, post content buttons, I am in the third hierarchy, or in the third layer of the hierarchy, or actually it's the fourth layer, assuming that we're starting from the app component. Instead of just having our data passed down all the way to this component as a prop, I can easily just reference the context and grab that data from the context. Okay, and again, the context is literally just an object that contains information that you can reference from within anywhere you want as long as you're inside that context. Okay, so now let's go ahead and actually set up a context in React so you better understand how this works and so that you can create more scalable code bases for your React project. So what we're going to do is this. I'm going to go ahead and inside my utils folder, I'm going to create a new folder called contexts. You may have as many contexts as you want because different contexts can represent different things. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new file, and I'm going to go ahead and call this user context because this context is going to pertain to user data. And I'm going to name the file with a .js extension because we're not dealing with any JSX at all, okay? So the way that we're going to create our context is first we need to import the create context function from React. This is a function that allows you to literally create a context. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to declare a variable and I'm going to call it user context, capital U, okay, equals create context, just like this. And then all you do now is, as an argument to the create context function, you just pass in any default value. This can be a string, this can be a number, Boolean, object, array, anything you want, okay? Now, you don't actually have to pass in any specific value because these values are going to get overridden when you actually set the values when we use what is called a context provider. But all you need to do is just shape your data over here. So since I'm dealing with a user, what I'll do is this. I'll go ahead and just have the ID be, I guess, actually I'll set it to 0 since I want my ID to be a numeric value. Username, I'll let that be an empty string. Email, empty string. And then display name, empty string. This can be anything you want. Okay, it doesn't really matter what you have set over here. Now, I'm going to also want to make sure I'm exporting this user context variable as a named export because I will need to reference this context later on, and we're done with this file. So now what I can do is I can go into my app.jsx file, okay? And I can import the user context from the utils context user context file. And then what I want to do is I want to use the user context provider, okay? So one thing that I should also mention is that the user context itself is an object, and you have these three values. You have the consumer, provider, and the display name. We want to...
I think this is something which we should cover in the next stream since I feel is very important. And yeah, it's also I'm gonna assume it may end here, but anyway, we'll be covering it tomorrow, so might as well do it then. One quick thing that I wanna just search upon before ending the stream is default versus export default versus named export. Yeah, so let's just check that real quick. Let's see here. Okay, there's a video here apparently. Let's just, oh, it's a private video. Okay. So let's just search it up. Export versus named default export versus named export. Yeah. Is it just in React?
Before going to the next step, I'll explain you the difference between the named imports and default imports. Here you can see I imported the input area from the components because here I have exported it as a default one. So this is called default imports. When you export something as a default, you can import it as a default one.
Meaning I don't have to use the curly brace, is that it?
But if you didn't export this as a default one, so let me show you the named export. So you have to enclose this inside a curly brace. Yeah, now I have exported it, but it is a named export, and you can see here does not contain a default export. It throws an error because in the app.js file, I tried to import a default import, but it is not there. It's a named import. So here also we need to enclose this inside a curly brace. And once I do like this, you can see now if I just save, oh sorry, yeah, now you can see it has been compiled successfully. And if I go to the browser, I still got the same things, right?
Yeah, but why? Why do we have this? Why do we have default export in JS? Well, in React actually, but it's somewhat a matter of opinion. Oh, okay. Wait, let's just read the question. I refer to all questions that offer, but none of this suggested why and when to use default export. So that default can be mentioned when there is only one export in a file. Any other reason for using default export in ES6 modules? It's somewhat a matter of opinion, but there are some objective aspects to it. You can have only one default export in a module, whereas you can have as many named exports as you like. If we provide a default export, the programmer using it has to come up with a name for it. This can lead to inconsistency in a code base where Mary might create import example from this, but Joe does this. In contrast, with a named export, the programmer doesn't have to think about what to call it unless there's a conflict with another identifier in their model. It's just import example from example. They get a nice early error if they try to import something that doesn't exist. To consistently only use name exports, programmers importing from modules in the project don't have to think about whether they want is the default or named. Okay. There's a conflict. For example, you want an example from two different as to rename. Can use any name and oh, I see. So yes, named export. No, yes. If you have want multiple exports, then there's only named export as an option. But yeah, okay, great. So here, they're creating three functions: speak, eat, drink, and they're just exporting it, named exports as such. Um, but what if we're using multiple modules with the same exported API? Of course, this was never gonna work. There are a few solutions though. Okay, we use aliases. What if we're exporting many functions of the same name from each module? Yeah, the code doesn't look neat. Thankfully, we don't need to namespace everything by hand. We can use the import as oh, okay. Oh, everything has this. Okay. Names. Okay, this we can also do it this way. Okay. The default export as API. Another alternative is to avoid authoring with ES modules named exports altogether. Instead, export an API on the default export. Export default. Oh, okay. This does so we can just do this. We don't have to do this as this. As it depends. Everything has its own pro and con to it. Alright, so I guess it's a matter of preference at the end of the day, with certain exceptions. Alright. So with that, I'll be ending the stream here and I'll see you on the next one. See you guys then.